What's up guys, today I'm going to be breaking down all kinds of different DPS numbers and trying to figure out what the meta for next season will be for PvE. I've already made a video talking about the sniper rifle changes, then also the grenade launcher changes, so definitely watch those two videos first because we will not be talking about those changes in this video. The point of this video is to figure out what are the best DPS options and best builds period for PvE next season, not things that are going to be decent, literally just the meta. So if there's something that you guys commented on the previous video and I don't have it in this video, it's more than likely because it's actually not nearly as good as you think it is. So I'm only going to be testing things that actually legitimately have a chance of being the meta next season. If you don't see something you suggested by the end of the video, or if I don't talk about it, you can go ahead and leave the comment again and I'll either give you the reason why I didn't show it off, or maybe I actually just forgot about it. Anyways, I want to start off this video by kind of setting the standard and placing the bar for what the other weapons will be competing against. First thing will be Whisper of the Worm, which I think will be one of the best around weapons in PvE next season. Right now on Greg it hits for 34,710. And incorrectly in my last video I stated that it will be receiving that 20% nerf, but it should be staying the exact same. So now looking at the rate of fire over 2 magazines, shooting 6 shots takes 3.989 seconds, meaning 52,209 DPS over 2 magazines. And the thing about Whisper of the Worm is that since it has white nail and you never have to reload, the more you shoot, the DPS barely falls off over time. So now if we shoot off 12 shots, so 4 magazines, never have to reload, that's going to now take roughly 8.775 seconds, meaning the DPS only went down to 47,500. So pretty much over its entire reserves, it will more or less stay at this number right here and not really drop too much further. Another thing about Whisper that will make it dominate 6-man activities is the fact that you can also pair it with Divinity. And Divinity will make it not only receive that 30% debuff, it will also make it extremely easy for the other 5 people in your fire team to proc white note over and over again and pretty much never have to worry about missing. So since Whisper is actually really good DPS, really good sustained damage, and it's going to be really easy to use in those 6-man activities, that's why I think it's going to be pretty much the must-pick meta. Moving on to the other thing that will be kind of like a standard for the next season will be Windigo for burst damage. This with explosive light hits for a lot, just over 30,000 right now, but it's going to get that 10% nerf. Then we look at the rate of fire over 1 magazine, it only takes 2.526 seconds, means the DPS over 1 magazine after the nerf will still be 65,311, which is a lot and will be pretty much the best burst DPS in the game. Another weapon that will actually still be kind of good for burst DPS will be Izanagi's Burden still. Once again, incorrectly in my last video I stated it will be getting the 20% nerf, but the damage will stay the same at that 86,000. The reload speed of Honed Edge will still be getting that huge nerf, which pretty much means the rate of fire will be going down by a lot. But if you only have to shoot 1 or 2 shots, as you see right here, 2 shots taking 3.291 seconds, the DPS will still be pretty good, and Izanagi's Burden will still be really good for those burst DPS scenarios. Last thing I want to talk about that is going to be kind of like the standard for next season before I compare all the other stuff is going to be 2-4 punch, where you stack 1-2 punch twice. And this is going to be really good for close range scenarios. Depending on what shotguns you're using, it's going to be different DPS wise slightly. I have a 140 and also a 55 RPM shotgun, so kind of like a balance of both. Plus the melee of 44,000. Doing the rate of fire of this combo 3 times, 5.119 seconds, mean DPS over 3 combos would be roughly 43,000 depending on the shotguns you're using. And if you pair that with different builds in the game, obviously that would just skyrocket really high. So recapping real quick, we have Whisper of the Worm, which is going to be really good for those 6-man activities, really good DPS, really good sustained. We also have 2-4 punch. We have Windigo, then also Izanagi's Burden for those burst DPS scenarios. So that's going to kind of be like the standard for the rest of the testing. So let's go ahead and start off with Borealis with Ionic Return, where if you break a matching shield with this weapon, you will get a 40% increase in damage. So as you see right here, I can change it to Solar, break a Solar shield, and now I get Ionic Return. Looking at Greg, that hits 28,912, which should be staying exactly the same next season and not getting any nerf at all because of the fact that the Shadowkeep sniper buff did not buff exotics. Therefore, the nerf shouldn't nerf them. And since once you reload, that buff goes away, it's going to be pretty much a 1 mag burst option, 3.307 seconds, meaning DPS for 1 mag is 43,700, which isn't bad for a special weapon, but once again, once you do 1 magazine, you have to reload and get the buff again. You can do some funky things with Traversive Steps where you can shoot 4 shots, then sprint to reload. That way you never actually manually reload the weapon and lose the perk. If you do that twice, it takes roughly 7.279 seconds, which as you see, even doing that, the DPS really falls off all the way down to 31,000. So this will be a decent burst option, but not necessarily that great. Up next, we will have the Lord of Wolves, and we'll mostly be looking at Release the Wolves for this video because it's going to be the higher DPS option. We're also going to assume you're going to hit only crits, which on a moving target is very hard. But let's just say you do. 1 magazine, DPS over 1 mag is 46,000. Which once again is pretty good burst damage, not quite as good as some of the other burst options we showed off at the beginning of the video, Now over 2 magazines with 1 reload. See how long that takes now. It's going to take roughly 5.651 seconds, meaning DPS drops to 37,000. And remember, this is assuming all crits, which isn't actually that likely with Lord of Wolves ever. Next up will be the Merciless, which I am not a fan of, but I saw this commented so many times I was like, I'll just do it just to show them. One thing that is weird about Merciless is as it charges up, you also lose damage, which is kind of weird, and the average over an entire magazine will be roughly 20,633 per shot, but at the same time as the damage goes lower, the rate of fire goes up, so over one magazine it takes roughly 5 seconds, a little under, which means the DPS would be 33,218, which really isn't that great. I mean, it's decent for a special weapon, but not great for exotic. And the main issue with the Merciless is the fact that you can't pre-charge it like you used to be able to, and even if you could, the thing only holds 14 ammo. 14! Even if you pre-charge it, then sprint with traversive steps to, you know, avoid having to reload, you only got 7 shots left. I mean, it has no ammo. Now moving on to the heavy exotics, first starting with Legend of Acreus. This one will actually be pretty surprising. Looking at the damage on Greg, it hits 2 numbers at 35.5 and also 9k. And there's 2 numbers I want to look at. First, the burst is shooting off 2 shots, taking 1.1 seconds. Acreus has really good burst DPS, as you see right here, at over 80,000 over 2 shots. Which is really good for those close range scenarios. But let's see if its sustained DPS is any good. Let's shoot off 8 shots, which will include 2 reloads. But if you have the catalyst, once you start reloading, it's actually going to be the same rate of fire. It doesn't even impact it at 7.778 seconds. Meaning DPS over 8 shots is still 46,000. So not only is the burst DPS of this weapon really good, the sustained DPS is actually really strong too. So that's definitely a legitimate pick. Up next will be Darcy, which is going to be a 140 RPM exotic heavy sniper rifle. Look at the damage on Greg. It pretty much has box breathing at 20,971. Now doing 1 magazine, so 7 shots. Takes 2.593 seconds. Meaning DPS over 1 mag is 56.6 thousand, which is actually pretty good and actually a little bit better than Whisper of the Worm. But once you get to the second magazine and you have to reload once, this is where it's going to really fall off and Whisper will beat it out. So Darcy might be slightly better for the first magazine, but after that, Whisper will be better the rest of the way. As you see right here, over 2 magazines, 43,000. It's also worth noting that Darcy is only good for 1 magazine, which pretty much means it's a burst DPS option, but then it's also competing against things like Windigo. Up next will be the Coil, which was pretty much the meta in year 1 of Destiny 2 for the longest time. Look at the damage on Greg. It's gonna hit 8 rockets, and trust me, I added all this up. It took me quite a while, and I made sure double checked, triple checked. It's gonna be doing roughly 51.9 thousand per shot. Now if we go ahead and look at the rate of fire of the weapon, just shooting off 2 shots, so 1 shot, reload, and then shoot again, it's going to take 3.806 seconds, meaning DPS is 27,279. So Coil is definitely not a good DPS option. It is pretty good for ad clear and major clear, but definitely not DPS. Up next we have the Sleeper, and I do not have the catalyst on my account. I went back and watched an old video, and it's roughly a 10% increase in rate of fire, then also 2 more ammo. And I believe that is still the exact same, so we can adjust the numbers if needed. Also, we look at a precision hit on Greg, which is for the most part the most efficient way of doing damage with Sleeper. Then looking at the rate of fire of this weapon, let's just go ahead and do 2 magazines. The reload is actually very quick on this weapon, but it's the rate of fire that just takes forever. As you see, shooting off the last 2 shots, it takes 9.357 seconds, meaning DPS over 2 mags would be 27,000, and even with the masterwork, that will not go too much higher. Definitely not 2xing the number, so Sleeper really isn't that great right now. Now on to 1000 Voices, which was one of my favorite exotics ever in Destiny 2. If you look at the damage on Greg, once again, it explodes 10 times for both of the numbers, which I double checked, triple checked. So it's going to be doing roughly 65,680 damage per shot on Greg. Now looking at the rate of fire over just 1 magazine, so 4 shots. It's going to take quite a while. At roughly 6.664 seconds, meaning DPS is just under 40,000, which isn't bad, but definitely not great. But 1k is also really good for major clear and things like that. Another one I went ahead and tested is Black Talon with the Catalyst. It's gonna be hard to predict what this will actually end up being once the sword changes go through, but right now it's actually not that bad of a burst DPS option. As you see right here, if you go ahead and block some damage. Hey Greg, can you shoot me? Hello? Anyways, let's go ahead and try that again with him actually shooting me this time. As you see, you can get off 2 heavy attacks once you block, and that will result in roughly 52,000 DPS, which is really good burst damage. And it's going to be hard to predict if that's going to go up or down with the sword changes, but it could be a solid pick next season. The final exotic I will be testing is going to be Xenophage, and I kind of already know what the result will be, but I saw this commented so many times, I just was like, okay, I'll throw it in. Look at the damage on Greg, it has no precision, it hits 15,332. Then looking at one magazine, looking at the rate of fire, shooting off 13 shots with full auto, 5.983 seconds, meaning 33,292 DPS, which isn't bad, but it's definitely not competing with some of the heavy hitters in the heavy slot. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to Anarchy combos. If you watched my video yesterday, we kind of looked at what Anarchy should be doing DPS wise next season. So it'll be roughly 14,412, but the thing about Anarchy is you can shoot 2 shots and do DPS with our weapons. So first looking at Mountaintop and pairing that with Anarchy, looking at the damage on Greg, it's going to hit roughly 24,000. Now getting the rate of fire, Mountaintop shooting off 5 shots in a Luna Rift. It's going to take roughly 6.349 seconds, meaning DPS of Mountaintop itself is 18.7 thousand. Pair that with Anarchy and you get 33,197. So that combo isn't that great. It's definitely not bad, but it's not even close to Whisper. Another combo we can do is Tranquility with Fireline, which I believe after the sniper changes will be the highest DPS legendary sniper. It's kind of hard to tell, but as far as I can tell right now, I believe that is true. Right now it's just under 24,000. After the changes, it should be roughly 18,000. It's really hard to tell because Fireline's a crit modifier, then they're also changing the crit modifier as is, so just assuming 18,000 over one magazine takes 4 seconds. The DPS of Tranquility itself is 31,000. The combo will be just under 46,000. So that is once again pretty good, but Whisper itself is better and is only one weapon. And the final one I want to look at is Anarchy plus 2-4 Punch. As we saw earlier in the video, 2-4 Punch itself does roughly 43,000 DPS. Then you add Anarchy on top of that, and the combo will be doing just under 58,000, which is actually pretty strong and will be very viable for those close range scenarios. So there was definitely a lot of numbers we just went over. So first recapping a few things that stood out to me. The number one surprise to me was Acreus. I kind of remembered it being very strong for burst DPS over like 2 or 3 shots. But over like 8+ shots, it was still doing like upper 40,000s DPS. So Acreus will actually be very strong for those close range encounters. It's going to have really good burst damage and really good sustained DPS, pretty much the same as Whisper of the Worm. So any scenario where you can actually get close to an enemy, Acreus will actually be very strong. Out of all these special weapons I tested, Lord of Wolves was the highest DPS. So if you're using Windigo and you need a little bit more damage, Lord of Wolves will be a pretty strong addition, but it's not going to be like a combo that you're going to be using over Whisper of the Worm in a raid, for example. Then finally, the last thing that kind of stood out to me was the fact that Darcy was actually pretty good for burst DPS over one magazine. But once you got to the second magazine, it was lower than Whisper of the Worm. So it's going to be kind of hard to actually see Darcy being used because of the fact that over one magazine, it is better than Whisper, but so is Windigo and Acreus and Izanagi's Burden. So those options will still be better for burst damage. Then once you get the second magazine, Whisper will be better for sustained damage. So even though Darcy isn't that bad, it's just not going to be better than the other options in any scenario. So I'm going to try to keep this short because the video is already extremely long. But what I think the meta will be next season is for any 6-player activity, for example, bosses and raids and things like that. I think Whisper of the Worm will be the meta. Then you'll pretty much just use whatever you want in terms of special and primaries. If there's a lot of majors in the encounter leading up to the boss fight, I'll probably use something like a shotgun, then my favorite primary. But if there's not that many majors and it's mostly red bars, I might use something like Loaded Question and take advantage of that really good group ad clear. And on top of that, one thing that will make Whisper incredibly strong is Divinity. If one person in your raid group uses that, you will never have to worry about missing white no procs. You will have that good DPS forever and really never have to worry about missing. Then in those 3-player activities, for example, strikes and even things like Sundial or Menagerie, that's where I think Windigo will really shine because of the fact that you're only going to be doing burst damage on bosses and not really ever having long boss fights. Then once again with Windigo, depending on what you're doing, if it's a lot of red bars, I might be using something like Huckleberry for my exotic. Or if it's something with a lot of majors and I need more damage, I might be using something like Lord of Wolves, Izanagi's Burden, or even something like Mountaintop. Then finally for any like close range encounters, Acreus will definitely be very strong. Then also any of the 2-4 punch combos, for example the Arc Hunter or the throwing hammers on Titan, any of those combos for close range scenarios will be very strong. And overall that's pretty much where I see the meta going. Whisper for 6-man activities, Windigo for 3-man activities, and that's pretty much going to be about it. And obviously once again the point of this video was to figure out what the meta would be, like literally the best of the best. A lot of the other things I tested in this video are actually very good and very viable, but the point was to figure out the best, not things that would be decent. So if you saw anything on this list that you actually like and it had pretty good numbers, obviously go ahead and use it and it'll probably work out well for you. I'm in no way trying to say that anything but the things I just mentioned would not be useful. The point of the video was just trying to predict what the actual like meta will be. One thing I want to quickly touch on, which I saw commented a bunch in different forums, is pairing 2 auto-loading holster weapons, for example a grenade launcher and a sniper. While this might seem like a good idea, it really actually isn't that good. For example, if you have, let's say, a 120 RPM spike grenade launcher that does roughly 45,000 DPS over one magazine, and you also have a sniper rifle which does, let's say, 25,000 DPS over one magazine, which actually might be kind of on the high side after the nerfs. When you go back and forth between the two weapons and never have to reload either of them, at best over time you're going to eventually get to the average of the two weapons. So for this example, 45,000 and 25,000, the average will be exactly 35,000. So over time, your DPS of that combo will be 35,000. So that's why I didn't put any combos like that on this list, because in theory they sound good, but they're actually really not. Pretty much you just take the average of the two weapons and that will be the result over the entire reserves. And in almost all those scenarios, Whisper will be just straight up better and only take up one weapon slot. Anyways, let me know what you think about all this. There's a lot of stuff going on. Please ask questions if anything wasn't answered. And once again, if I didn't go over something in this video, it's probably because it's not nearly as good as you actually think it is. Anyways, thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.